Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Welcome to the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Oliver and I'm a former alcoholic and addict now in recovery. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction for people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. Everyone who participates in the podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology and will focus on a variety of different types of recovery, including 12-step recovery programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and things like Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery, Dharma, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and recovery, so we suggest it only as one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, please go to www.rehab.melbourne. Now, we have a very special episode for you today. On the line, I have a former guest at Hills and Rangers Private, whose name is Dena. Say hello.
Hi.
What a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming in, Dena.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So, I have a whole bunch of questions formulated for you, but before we get to that, I would like to do the reading for today that I have picked, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And it's from the JFT, the Just for Today Narcotics Anonymous daily readings book, and it's called How Long Do I Have to Go? It's from August the 18th, but we're doing it today on November the 23rd. So it goes, the way to remain a productive, responsible member of society is to put our recovery first. Basic text, page 106. The meetings have been great. Each night we've attended, we've gathered with other addicts to share experience, strength and hope. And each day we've used what we've learned in the meetings to continue our recovery. Meanwhile, life goes on. Work, family, friends, school, sport, entertainment, community activities, civic obligations, all call out for our time. The demands of everyday living sometimes make us ask ourselves, how long do I have to go to these meetings? Let's think about this. Before coming to Narcotics Anonymous, could we stay clean on our own? What makes us think we can now? Then there's the disease itself to consider. The chronic self-centeredness, the obsessiveness, the compulsive behaviour patterns that express themselves in so many areas of our lives. Can we live and enjoy life without effective treatment for our disease? No. Ordinary people may not have to worry about such things, but we're not ordinary people, we're addicts. We can't pretend we don't have a fatal progressive illness because we do. Without our program, we may not survive to worry about the demands of work, school, family, or anything else. NA meetings give us the support and direction we need to recover from our addiction, allowing us to live the fullest lives possible. Just for today, I want to live and enjoy life. To do that, I will put my recovery first. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and there's a few sort of taboo concepts like the disease concept. I am an NA guy, so I sort of subscribe to some of those things, but the WHO does classify addiction as a disease. I personally think it's more of a mental health thing. So we can look at it that way, and we don't necessarily have to be talking about needing NA to stay clean, but I think the bottom line, I want to live and enjoy life. To do that, I will put my recovery first. I think putting our recoveries first is probably the most important thing, at least in my experience, that I had to do in order to remain in recovery. I think there'll be a lot of listeners out there who are in early recovery, and I think it's just really important that everybody has to put their recovery first for those early days. And Dena, I'm sure you're at that point where you're in this new part of your life, and all those things are still at the forefront. So the self-care and all those things, you're still probably involved in that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
It's very important that I kind of maintain the routine and program that I had in the rehab, especially at the moment when I'm so vulnerable, like anyone who's in early recovery. I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely say that's my experience as well in those early days. And I mean, even now, I still put my recovery first. And I think it's literally just I was living my life in my old behaviours for such a long time that I have to really, really work hard at changing that sort of default state that I was in to a new, like finding that new way to live and building that new life in recovery. I literally think that's pretty much what it's all about. So
yeah, it does feel like a whole new way of living. Like I always knew how to do extremes really well, like how to be on and off, but I never knew the in between. And I think that's what early recovery is giving me, this really like neutral, stable in between. Yeah. And that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I remember sort of like around about the 2-week mark of, in rehab, I felt like I'd woken up from a really, really deep sleep for a long period of time. I felt like I'd woken up and I was just in this new place where everything was new for me, or I was seeing it through a new lens, this lens of sobriety and clarity, it was beautiful. It was also a little bit scary. So I think, I needed to work really hard at just working out how to do everything again, because it was just such a big change. So anyway, we're going to talk about your experience at Hills and Ranges Private as a guest. So I've got all these questions that we're going to talk about. And the first one is, how did you feel before you arrived on your first day at Hills and Ranges Private?
Well, I was pretty much at rock bottom before I arrived. I was so unwell that I didn't even call to do my admission. My sister called for me. I'd really given up. I'd already done a stint at another rehab, and I'd kind of come out of there with full of hope, and then relapsed really badly, and was just like I'd lost all hope. I was just at absolute rock bottom, and my sister found a place, and she called and did the admission, and then like basically the next day that was it, and I was off. So I didn't really have much time to process it, but like it was pretty terrible before I arrived.
Sometimes that's such a good thing, just to not have time to process it and just to be scooped up and put into this safe environment, I think.
Yeah, I was really desperate. I was willing to. I thought I'd already done everything by going to the first rehab, but like this time around, I was just broken. Like I just needed someone to save me. Yeah.
I think there's, like I've heard it said, like rock bottom is when you decide to stop digging, and you can always dig a little bit more. So even though, I definitely tried to enter recovery through various means, I actually decided to stop digging, and it took a really, really long time for me to get to that point. And when I went into treatment for the first time for me, really, I think I finally decided to stop digging. But not only that, but I was provided with the sort of skills and treatment and experience to actually learn how to stop digging that rock bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And my second question is, how long did you stay for?
I stayed for 2 months. So I was always doing 28 days, and then I extended for 2 weeks, and then I still didn't feel ready to leave after 6 weeks, so I extended another 2 weeks. So I did 2 months.
So it sounds like it's flexible. I know there's a 28-day program. There's also a 9-month program. So, I think it sounds like it's sort of up to the individual. It's a holistic thing. And if somebody needs more, then they can get that help more, which is great.
Yeah. I think that's a really good thing about the program there. It is really individualized, and it caters to individual needs. And I think I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, you can't just treat people with this cookie cutter kind of treatment. And I think that's what definitely my experience with other rehabs as someone who's got friends in rehab. I've been to visit at a bunch of different ones, and I see people who are in recovery who have experience from various different places. And yeah, the program at Hills and Ranges Private seems to be sort of like totally different and very, very individualised, which is great. Now, I have a big question. Was there a point where you started to feel better, and how long did it take, and what was it like?
Yeah, I think it took me a while. I think it was about 3 weeks in, I started to feel better. And that's really why I wanted to extend, because I didn't want to just have 1 week in there where I was actually participating and learning.
Yeah.
The first 3 weeks I was just really still so depressed and anxious and broken and isolating. And then by the third week I started to really feel myself again, and I just started to come back to life and felt the benefits of the program really working.
Amazing.
And I think I remember at the start when we do the morning check-ins, other people would check in as feeling good. And I remember the first 2 weeks I was like, when am I ever going to be able to check in as feeling good? My check-ins are always that I feel so anxious and terrible. And then in the last month I was consistently checking in as feeling good, which was such a miracle for me.
Wow. I mean, my experience as as a specialist consultant at Hills and Ranges Private, I come in on Thursdays and I get to make music with all the guests, and I sing and play guitar. And my experience of seeing you in your, the first couple or 2 or 3 weeks of your stay was really, really different to what you were like at the end of your stay, or towards the end of your stay. In the beginning, I think, you were just sort of, doing that, the isolating and the anxiety, I think that's to be expected for us when we sort of come into recovery. I mean, it's such a anxiety triggering experience to live life without that chemical buffer that we always had. And I mean, to see you wake up from that, it was like watching forgive the cheesy metaphors, the butterfly coming out of the cocoon, really, but really though, that's how I felt as well when I had my treatment. I literally felt like I'd woken up in a way, and it was phenomenal.
Thank you.
No worries. That's what we get. It's definitely really, really hard work. But I think
it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I've ever done, and the most painful experience and traumatizing experience. But I did feel that. I did feel that kind of awakening and coming back to life, and having a whole kind of new balance and safety, which is really cool.
And I think, I don't know, maybe it's too early to say, because it's not all that long ago, but for me, definitely, I would say that it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, but I can flip it and say that it was also, without a doubt, beyond a doubt, I've done some amazing things in my life, but this was beyond a doubt the best thing I've ever done for myself.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I was doing a quiz with my friend yesterday, and one of the questions was, what is your greatest accomplishment? And in the past, I would have thought it would have been a career thing. And straight away I was like, just getting through this, surviving this year and coming out the other end of it. 100% is the greatest accomplishment of my life at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And
for sure.
As time goes on, you will probably, I can safely say, because I've been in recovery for over 4 years, that, that first thing that I did was the hardest and best thing of my life, but it gets better and better and better. And I can trace that all back to that initial, hard work that I did in the beginning. The opportunities just come and they don't stop, in recovery, as long as we keep doing that work, which is amazing. Yeah.
It's exciting.
And where you're obviously you're a singer and a musician, so as am I, and I probably my best accomplishment before that is, selling out a venue at the launch of my first album and having like a line out the door and, playing a really good gig and feeling really good about it and being, feeling popular and wanted and desired and valuable. And it's like now it's like that pales in comparison to the reward that I get from doing this hard work and focusing on myself and being in recovery,
Yeah, totally. Completely agree.
Now, the question I have, we probably touched on it, I guess, what was the hardest part of your stay?
I mean, I think the hardest part was, honestly, it was really hard that the relapse part of it, the fact that I was back into rehab, that was really hard for me. That I was like, that I'd already done 6 weeks and I'd given it my everything and then done this really traumatic work. And then I felt like a failure that I had to go back into rehab. Like the relapse just really set me back. And it took me a while to surrender to the program at Hills and Ranges and realize that it's a very different program and I was going to benefit from it in very different ways. Like, I think I needed both of those experiences because I needed to work on all my trauma stuff and I needed to detox, but I also needed to like have a really practical program, which Hills and Ranges gave me. So I think just like, kind of being, humble enough to realize that, for me, it took another go and I had to keep trying. I think that was the hardest part. And it was like we'd jump onto meetings at Hills and Ranges and I was seeing all my friends from Malvern like on the meetings and they were all like 6 months clean and 8 months clean and I was like, well, I'm back in rehab, and like that was quite hard for me.
Yeah. Well, that feeling of, I think, I felt that there's huge amounts of, there's guilt, there's shame, there's feelings of failure, and they're all really, really difficult to deal with. But, there is no one way and one path for everybody. And so, that's probably the hardest part is realizing that, you have your own path. And that's probably also the best part of it too, is that you've found your path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought, there was a way to do recovery well, like to get an A+ at recovery if I just work really hard, like I have at everything else in my life, just have a good work ethic about recovery. Yeah. But for me, that's still, it's like everyone's journey is so different. And for some people, they get it straight away. And for other people, they'll relapse 1,000 times. Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, like I just had to realize it wasn't about how well I did it. It was, when I was ready. For
sure. And I think, look, like, spoiler alert, there are a lot of people in recovery who are clean, they're sober, they're in recovery, and they're really deeply unhappy. So, there's no such thing as an A+ at recovery. If we all got A+ just because we were clean, then, there'd be a lot of people white-knuckling their way through life and getting A+, but really they probably wouldn't feel like an A+. And I think we totally have to find our way of doing it. And, that's just sort of, I think Hills and Ranges Private is a place where you learn how to do that. And then it equips you with the skills to work out your own way of doing it with the skills you learn while you're, receiving treatment there, it's just all part of it. It's part of what we do. And the other question, what was the best part of your stay?
I had a really amazing stay, to be honest. Like it actually changed my life. So there was a lot of really good things. Yeah. Obviously music, obviously. Awesome. But yeah, honestly, I think the program there is really strong. And I've found being out for a while now, like in the last few weeks, I'm really using what I learned, and like that's really cool. Like I'm using these different things that I learned in there, and I just think it's a really strong program that gives me a way to manage life and not pick up again, and you know, the way they explained it to me is like, it's good to understand and know your trauma, but there's no point in sitting in that and living in that, because that doesn't stop you from picking up again. And instead, like, here's a program that keeps the momentum moving forward. And I think having routine and structure and like the fact that you cook your own food and you exercise, and it's like more of a holistic approach. And, you know, it's not like you're in a hospital locked away where someone's cooking all your meals for you, doing everything for you. Like, this feels more of like a halfway where you actually learn how to be a functioning adult again in the world. And like, honestly, the best thing of all for me was, you know, I had a really amazing counselor there, and I think everyone that works there, I think the fact that they're in recovery just makes it 1,000 times better. I've had, you know, so many experiences with psychiatrists and psychologists, and I couldn't get the help I needed. And then, you know, like, my counselor there really, really helped me, and she'd been through recovery. And like, I think that's so powerful.
Awesome. That's so powerful. And that brings me to my final question is, what is your recovery program and your daily life like today?
Yeah, well, I've just tried to maintain the routine I created there as much as possible. So I'm still exercising first thing in the morning like I was doing over there. And I'm still connected with the trainer that I was working with at Hills and Ranges, because he's like just been amazing, and you know, that's been a big part of it for me. And then I do my readings, and I send my you know, summary of my readings to my sponsor. I made sure that I had a sponsor before I left. And then I've been getting back into work, which has been awesome, and just like really having a structured day of taking care of myself, not stressing myself out too much. And it's been really cool. Like, I feel like I'm doing things I couldn't do before. I'm more reliable. I'm seeing family members that I, you know, missed out on seeing, and showing up, and that's really cool. And then at night I do a meeting, and yeah, just making sure I get a lot of sleep and healthy food, and yeah, balance.
That sounds like you're doing all the right things. And I mean, as we go, I think in my experience, as I went through my early recovery, I worked out what I needed to do, and I built on my, you know, my program, and it definitely changed over time, over the months and years since treatment. And I've learned that there are some things that I absolutely have to do, and I've learned, you know, as I have rebuilt my life, that my recovery program is, you know, it's literally building a bridge back into a normal life. And I didn't necessarily build the bridge just to live on the bridge. I had to actually build the rest of my life up too. And I think that's, you know, as time goes on, we become, you know, we learn to be functional members of society. We learn to work, we hold down jobs, and all those things that were really difficult become, you know, easier and easier, and life just gets better and it opens up. And as they say, more will be revealed. So the more time goes on, the more we realise that, well, we can get through everything that life throws at us, and we don't have to use.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's not just, for me, it's like, it's not just about not using. And I remember, like, one of the first things I heard at Hills and Ranges was, you know, Ed said, you know, you don't just have to survive in recovery, you get to thrive. And I was like, but like, that just lit me up. I was like, it's just so nice to hear someone talking about recovery as not just being a means to an end in a way I'm going to survive life, but a way I can actually like live an amazing life and give back and have purpose. So I think that's really cool. Exciting.
Well, I certainly didn't do all this hard work just to survive, you know.
Exactly.
Forget about it. I want to thrive, and you know, we deserve to thrive, and we learn to thrive, you know, and it's it's a big journey. So, well, I mean, that's phenomenal. I would like to thank you for coming on the show. We are out of time. So, look, I mean, if as a final sort of parting statement, if you could go back in time and give your past self a message, perhaps it was at that point where, you know, you'd relapsed again and you didn't know what to do, you were at that rock bottom, what would it be?
think it would be just to hold on to hope.
Yeah.
And hold on to hope that that it will get better. Like that there is an answer, that there are people that can help you, and there is a program.
Yeah.
And it might just take a bit longer.
Yep. Yeah. I would give that same message to myself as well, because it's, you know, we at the Recovery Cast, I mean, my job is to share that hope that there is, you know, this can be such a hopeless condition, this, you know, addiction, alcoholism, whatever it is, it can be so hopeless. And, you know, that there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, and we can all achieve it. We just have to keep trying. So, I mean, it's beautiful. So thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me, Ollie.
No worries. I'm sure we'll catch up soon. So thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Ranges Private. That was a very long episode, but I mean, there was so much gold there. Dena's doing an amazing job. And look, if you are thinking that you might want to spend some time at Hills and Ranges Private, then jump on www.rehab.melbourne. The staff at Hills and Ranges Private will answer any questions that you may have. And until then, hold on to hope. Don't give up. Keep doing what you do. I'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.